This is the 91st minute.
Several clubs are expressing concerns about the potential transfer of Allan Saint-Maximin from Newcastle United to Saudi Pro League side Al Ahly. The deal is reported to be around £30 million and involves two teams under the same majority ownership, Saudi Arabia's Public Investment Fund, PIF. Premier League regulations require transactions above £1 million to be checked for compliance with market value, quote-unquote market value. Some English top-flight teams suspect the PIF link is being used to inflate the transfer fee to help Newcastle comply with FFP rules. These clubs are seeking clarification from the Premier League on how market value is established in such cases and want more transparency in this process. Obviously, Newcastle is comfortable with the valuation of Saint-Maximin and their takeover, their big Saudi takeover a couple of years ago was approved with assurances that the Saudi state would not control the club. PIF owns 80% of Newcastle, with the remaining stakes by other partners. And PIF has, obviously, as we all know, has stakes in the four founding members of the Saudi Pro League, which is why this is all a big issue here. This is a very interesting one, right? This is almost along the lines, it kind of hints on the, with the Bowley thing at Chelsea, we kind of hinted at this, right? Similar ownership somewhere, but this is straight up owned by PIF to club owned by PIF. Interesting scenario we have here now.
It is. I think what's interesting, what really caught my eye about this is that I don't know if it's just me, but I don't think 30 million for St. Maxim's that unreasonable. Like, if it was another Premier League team buying him for 30 million, I don't think there'd be a question. It's just the way it goes, right? I think you've seen what Anthony Gordon moved for 40 something, and I would say he's not had a career he's not had an impact at Everton that St. Maximin had at Newcastle. It might be a little bit too high, but you can then just argue Newcastle know that Saudi Arabia have got the money. I don't understand why it's this. No, I understand why this transfer has brought up these questions because it's the majority ownership of the two clubs, but I don't think the price is that bad. And then Dovlek put in there, market value is hype, isn't it? It's all about hype, not talent. It's all about what that club values that player as, or the selling club values that player as, and how much income they generate and how much merchandise they sell and all of this sort of stuff. So it does open up a lot of questions about diving in. So if the Premier League stopped this transfer, I would argue that Newcastle would be fully in their rights to go back and say, you've got to go and investigate all the Chelsea sales to Saudi Arabia, because we know that link is there. So I don't think the Premier League I think they've given it ratification recently, but I don't think the Premier League are going to do very much, because everyone will now be able to point back to a transfer and go, well, you need to go and investigate that because of potential links, and how do you know who owns this, and how do you know who owns that as the club? So I think the Premier League have shot themselves in the foot, basically. But yeah, it's an interesting one.
I think I mentioned when we talked about that story with the Chelsea stuff, it's, unless they come out and change the rules clearly and have a whole new section of the rule book or the law that talks specifically about this, you can't do anything, really. We said at the time there's nothing really to stop Chelsea doing what they did. Like, if the Premier League are like, I think, and I'm almost positive I said it during that Chelsea segment, which is, if they think, oh, we don't want this to happen, this is a bit of a loophole, they need to close the loophole, and they need to do it now. Or, as I suspect, maybe they will do it, but it will come, that legislation will come through over the next year, and then by next summer you won't be able to do certain things that you've been able to do this year. I feel like that's how a lot of sporting rules and regs get changed in any sport. And, one team does something and the others are like, oh, we could have done that, and then they're like, right, we got to stop that from happening again. Like F1's a perfect example of that. So, it's that. I just think until they close it, there's nothing we can do. And I agree with you. I don't think that's a crazy evaluation of his market value, given the prices wingers go for. We all know We can all point out
Yeah.
some expensive wingers. We won't do it.
I mean,
but we can.
they just bought Harvey Barnes, right, from the Championship for 42 million. In theory, then you should be getting him cheaper than Saint-Maximin, who's a Premier League player. I'm like, it's whether he's English or not, the tax, but yeah. Sorry, Kurt, go on.
No, sorry, Hoff. Sorry.
I think the valuation thing, I agree. I think that's not an unreasonable value for Saint-Maximin. I think if the Premier League ever develops rules about that, how do you determine market value? How do you determine what's not necessarily a value, like this player's worth this much, that player's worth that much, just like a percentage, or like I can't even like comprehend how you say one guy, oh, he scored 14 goals, but 3 were penalties. And this guy scored 14 goals, 12 were from the run of play. Like, are they valued the same? Are they the same age, same contract? It's really fascinating how that could potentially happen. What's an unfair value for that guy? Let's say a club needs a player in that position, they'll pay more. They, in theory, would pay more for it. It's the
prime example for me is, I think, like just taking your sort of analogy to a next level, is if your club is really shit at set pieces, you're going to go and pay a lot more for James Ward-Prowse than any other club would, because you need a set piece taker, and that's your valuation of it, right? That's how it works. If you've got a missing piece, Declan Rice, you've got a missing piece, you go and buy him because you think he's going to complete the transfer and complete the squad. Yeah, like that's just how football works.
James Ward-Prowse continues.
It continues, mate. I love him. Absolutely love him. Get him back in the Premier League. Sign him up, Ten Hag. Sign him up. I think it's just bonkers, and I feel like that's a legacy thing. Any transfer over $1 million. Well, what transfer in and out of the Premier League is less than $1 million now?
Right.
Like that sounds like it's a legacy thing. Like back in the days of, I mean, well, rest in peace to Trevor Francis, the first £1 million man, died yesterday. But he was the first £1 million transfer back in 1990 something. How far have we come since then? What transfer's done for under $1 million? That's not a youth player that anyone, a risky youth signing to see if they make it or not. It's a bit strange that's
I mean, the evaluation's one aspect of it. I think the the key here is if Al Ahly were UEFA affiliated, this transfer would be blocked, just simply because it's the new multi-club ownership rules that are in place, right? I think that's really what it's about here, because this is a direct, like we said, like I mentioned earlier, it's like the Chelsea, we kind of hinted at it, right? These clear lake ownership, this is directly what we were talking about earlier. I mean, about a club signing another club, under the same ownership, or second player under the same ownership, and this brings up the idea of when they place those rules on the loan restrictions, right? Because Manchester City, for example, they have a massive club network, right? And we were talking about also Chelsea has pretty big. They have affiliation with the Dutch teams, and they were famous for loaning out tons of players, right? That's what Chelsea were doing. And then I remember when they changed that rule, I was talking about how they'll just sell them. What's going to stop them from just selling them with a outrageous buyback clause or something like that, right? There was nothing in place at the time stopping that type of thing to happen. And evidently there still isn't. So I think that's the big thing here. And we touched on it with the Mbappe in the earlier segment, but this is where FIFA has to come in and do something. They got to come in and create some legislature that talks about multi-club ownership, that talks about paying exorbitant fees for players, things like this. Like, it's all headed towards the famous salary cap or something. I mean, it's got to be headed somewhere like that. Otherwise, one nation has unlimited funds. No one will be able to compete in the long run if they're allowed to use them. But
you can cap a salary, but you can't cap transfer fees. I've just posted it in the chat, right? It goes against the world free market economy. If someone values something at that and they offer you that money, then you sell it.
Well,
if FIFA
if there's
try
a
and block
salary
it, they'll
cap.
just go to. Yeah, but salaries are different. Salaries are
think
different. A
rules
transfer
on-
fee.
I think the simplest way, and it would be one, you can't transfer a player between two clubs you own yourself. I mean, it's a conflict of interest, right off the bat. It'd be an easy one to say no more of that. And then obviously they're going to have to police indirect moves, because then people would go, well, he'll go to there and then we'll buy him from there. You know, like it's
But
big game of chess.
It's such a big global economy, football, that the big money owners will always find loopholes around any rules that are there. And it's just a case like Milo was saying, right? Okay, you can do that for this season, and next season we're shutting that down.
well,
And then they take another season to find another loophole and stuff like that.
I think the simple solution is multi-club ownership. Okay, I mean I don't know how you're gonna stop that, and you know, like you're saying, there could be some like backdoor ways to kind of get players to move to certain clubs. Why doesn't FIFA just implement financial fair play? You know, it's UEFA specific right now. I think FIFA just has to be like, all right, we're doing financial fair play for everybody. Because FFP is specific to UEFA. There's no financial fair play in other countries. I think this is the first time that a non-UEFA anything has more buying power than UEFA, or you know, any UEFA teams, or etc. Yeah, it wasn't a big problem, you know. MLS, you know, whatever, getting Messi over, you know, I mean, this is the first big one, right? I mean, China a little bit, or whatever. But I think that's what has to happen.
When China first started buying all these players, UEFA basically shat themselves, thinking this was going to be a really big problem, that all of the big players were going to move to China. And they were struggling to come up with an idea to keep the players in UEFA, and I think it'll be the same. I think that's because China basically ran out of money and didn't do it sensibly, whereas Saudi Arabia looks like it is, or potentially could do it more sensibly because of the unlimited wealth that everyone keeps talking about. It could be more of a problem, but again, I don't know how you introduce something that actually gets around global laws or changes global laws, because whatever happens, FIFA can come up with a law or come up with a rule or investigate a transfer, and a club can go to the Court of Arbitration for Sport, which is outside of football. It's the rules of the world, not just football, and they'll go, well, you're not breaking any, you're not doing anything illegal in the eyes of the world in an economy trade. And that's the problem FIFA and UEFA will always have. They have to, and that's why I think UEFA have made a rule and FIFA can't make a rule, because FIFA know that they'll just get turned over by lawyers, i.e. like Man City, Man United, whoever can afford to have the best lawyers and the biggest group of lawyers and drag things out, because they're going to have more money than FIFA to go to court and
as stated, you know, FIFA not exactly the most trustworthy organization.
Exactly.
Like I think there's a problem there as well, right? And I mean, it could. Yeah, I just don't know what the answer is, but I think something's going to change. Something will have to change. But yeah, I have no idea what that might be.
It's a weird perspective to think. Let's say Sir Jim Ratcliffe won the Man United bid, right? We wouldn't be able to sell players to Nice or Nantes. Nice. Which one does he own? Nice. We wouldn't be able to sell players to Nice, but Newcastle could still sell players to the PIF. That's when to Al Halil. That's when it gets a bit strange, right? That there's one rule for one club in the Premier League and a different rule for another one. Just because someone owns two clubs in Europe and one owns two clubs, one in Europe, one out of Europe. That's when it gets very complicated.
That's where FIFA. UEFA maybe could do that. You know, they could step in and be like, you can't. You know, from our end, from UEFA's end, if you want to buy players from UEFA's, you can't go to another club that you own in another country. I don't know. It might be something UEFA could do, though. You know, some localized.
Yeah.
And I don't think people could. Apart from the initial, like the people involved might be like, well, this is not right. Like coming out with this, but like, I don't think people would be. The majority of people would be fine with it, because there's such a conflict of interest apparent in all of this that we're talking about, that, you know, I think 98% of the sporting world or more would be like, yeah, that's probably a smart move, you know?
Yeah. Just get him by some money laundering law.
Yeah.
That's a global rule. Just get him on that. That's fine.
Subscribe to the 91st Minute here on YouTube and use the links in the description to follow us on all social media platforms.